Run actually will be part of the Wilson administration, though. So you've got Taft as the Republican, you've got Roosevelt as the progressive bull moose, and then Wilson becomes the Democrat nominee, former governor from New Jersey. Now, Wilson was progressive, but he had a very, very strong social conservatism to him.
Racism.
He was pretty racist. In fact, he actually was born in Virginia, and his mother was wildly racist. And he sort of carried that Southern. His mom was born in the Confederacy, and he sort of carried those sort of old Confederate traditional issues. In fact, when he became president, Roosevelt had put in place actually quite a few African Americans inside the federal government, and Wilson got rid of all of them. And the only job you could be if you were black in the federal government was like a domestic servant. Roosevelt actually gave some African Americans some actual, actual jobs that were contributing to, like, intellectually. Wilson got rid of all those. Wilson was a really interesting character because he was so brilliant and so progressive in one sense, but blinded by hate in a different sense. Quite an intriguing duality. Duncan, on every single paper Duncan ever wrote in college, which is a lot if you're a history major, he made sure the phrase intriguing duality was in every paper. Actually, two of our friends did. Intriguing duality. They made it happen in every single paper, including their last, our college thesis paper. We had like the biggest culmination if you're a senior,
Going to be terrible on it.
Well, not terrible on it, but yeah, intriguing duality on all of them. And it's good. I've almost forgotten your sister's name. In your sister's class, Andrew Kinder wrote Intriguing Duality and Gibbs did it in every paper once they found that out. And we used to also quote from our friend Dr. Majumdar, who was neither a doctor nor a historian. Actually, he became a doctor. But according to Dr. Majumdar, and they would say something, because we'd ask our friend Majumdar something, and he would say, "Tell us this," and he would say, "Whatever he said." Okay, I'm quoting you. We didn't like cite him as actual evidence, so it wasn't plagiarism, but it was funny. We talked about Dr. Majumdar a lot. When you write that many papers, you got to kind of entertain yourself. Okay, so then you have, so he's progressive, Roosevelt's progressive. Then you have our uber progressive Eugene Debs. And Eugene Debs runs as a socialist and is going to garner over 1 million votes. He didn't just show up to do nothing. I mean, he got lots of votes. The actual results were not so good for the Republican Party. No, that's a shame. They were not so good for the old guard wing of the Conservative Party. Taft only got 8 electoral votes. This is a sitting president who got 8 electoral votes. Roosevelt got 88. And Wilson got 400 and something. Debs got no electoral votes, but did take a lot of votes from Roosevelt. See, the problem was the Republicans splitting. The popular vote was a lot closer if you would have added Taft's and Roosevelt's popular vote together. But because they split, it killed them, and Wilson sort of walked into victory. And he ran basically saying, "I'm going to do 3 things up front." In fact, Wilson's first term in office is one of the most legislatively impressive terms ever. He said, "I'm going to change tariff laws, I'm going to fix banking laws, and so tariff laws, banking laws, and antitrust laws." And he comes into president, and like I said before, PhD from Johns Hopkins in political science, real smart. First thing he does exactly what he says he's going to do. He passes the Underwood Tariff Law. Well, guess what the Underwood Tariff Law undoes? Do what?
The
The pay knowledge tariff. So the Underwood Tariff Law puts tariffs back to their spot before pay knowledge, which was considerably lower. And what does this lower tariff do for people now? Lowers their prices. So this is for consumers. Remember, progressives were about consumer protection. Remember also the fact that Debs and Roosevelt and Wilson got this many votes and Taft got so little. What message does that send to politicians? What do the American people want? They want progressivism, right? They saw this as a mandate for change. Oftentimes politicians say, well, I won, Obama's like, I won 51% of the vote. I have a mandate. I'm not sure if 51% of the vote's a mandate. But 76% or whatever of the vote is definitely a mandate. Yeah.
This is kind of on the topic of tariffs. I know that China's has like high tariffs for like solar panels and stuff from the EU and America. But if the tariffs aren't there, then there's a ton of companies or downsizing are going under. But the tariffs are placed. Couldn't that kind of lower prices because then they could produce more, American companies? If they can produce more, then the prices would go lower.
Why would they produce more when China's put tariffs on us?
No, there's being tariffs put on China for that.
Oh, American companies can produce more, yeah, but in terms of the world market, no.
No, but couldn't that lower prices if they're producing more?
No. Well, when we get to that Navy macro, you'll see. But no, tariffs, like textbook-wise, and I could show you graphically if you wanted to, will raise the price. Now, it might create American jobs, but globally, it will keep the price higher than it should be. I don't want to put the graph right now, but I can show you eventually. Also, in what tariff happened in 1913? Also that happened in 1913 was the 16th and 17th Amendment. The 16th Amendment was John Boehner's favorite thing, income tax. Grover Norquist is happy now. We have an income tax. Now, when they passed the income tax law, it is a very, very small tax on mostly just the wealthy. It has obviously changed. So now wealthy people like history and economics teachers are taxed. I mean, I make so much money, they tax me like 90%. That's pretty awful. What does the 17th Amendment do? Regulation Senate, right? Both in 1913. 1913 has a lot of crap going on. I know. Add it.
Was the direct election of representatives a law or?
Direct election of senators, it was an amendment.
Well, it said senators, not just, but it didn't count for the representatives.
Representatives were already directly elected.
Oh. Well, you didn't mention that, I don't think.
It's
The Constitution mentioned it. It's been that way forever.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Now you do. That's good. We're learning.
Yeah.
All right. All right. Also in 1913, the Federal Reserve Act is passed, and this is probably one of the 5 most important laws passed in the 20th century. The Federal Reserve Act, remember, what is the Federal Reserve Act a reaction to?
Failing banks.
Panic of 1907, which is part about over-speculation in the banking industry and the fact that fear of bank failures. And so the Federal Reserve, I am an awesome... How many times have I drawn the United States of America for you guys? Okay, good. Here it comes again.
And you always say you're an awesome drawer.
I am an awesome artist.
This is better than usual. You should always be
I'm a really good artist. Alright. It sort of looks like a puppy. But here we go. Alright. If you look at a dollar... Does anyone have a dollar bill on them? It actually needs to be a $1 bill.
I don't have
I mean, if you have... hey,
I don't carry silver.
I got Benjamins. If you look at... you look at them. If you look... I don't need it. You look at it. Alright? I know what it looks like. If you look at a dollar bill and look at George Washington smack in the face. Now, on any dollar bill, 5, 10, 20, I carry $27 bills. But if you look, at the top it'll say Federal Reserve Note on any dollar bill, like any currency. On the $1 bill, what you can see though, is you look at George's face and you hang a left, and you'll see a letter with a circle around it, and it'll have a city and a state. And the city or state is probably either New York or Boston or Washington or Richmond or Atlanta.
Kansas
Or
City.
I'm getting there. Or Cleveland or Kansas City or St. Louis or Minneapolis or Denver or San Francisco. Did I miss anybody's?
Dallas.
Dallas.
Oh,
Did you say St. Louis?
I said St. Louis.
What about Philadelphia?
I missed it. There's 12 banks. There are 12 regional Federal Reserve banks. And the Federal Reserve is a really interesting combination between private money, like actual banks can put money in the Federal Reserve, and it's quasi-government. So let's say here's Kentucky right here, right? Here's Kentucky, and here's Lawrenceburg, right? And then here's the Fed, right? The Fed has, Federal Reserve has each branch, like there are branches all over the country, but each regional bank has a president. And the Fed's Open Market Committee determines how many treasury bond decisions in terms of buying and selling that affects interest rates. They can set discount loan rates, and I'm not going to go into that, but when you take AP Macro, you will know all about it when you take it. But let's say here is, where all my markers go, by the way? Why are they all gone?
Your class stole them yesterday.
Stupid. Man, teaching would be awesome if it wasn't for students.
We love you too, Mr.
But
Sayer.
Mr. Sayer, we're the best part of your day.
You actually are. Teaching, I actually do love teaching.
I don't know, your second block, so looks pretty
I
fun.
love my second block. They're really good kids. I've got good kids.
Yeah, we'll all be fun.
If you're a teacher and you look for bad kids, you only want to focus on kids who are problems, then everyone's going to find kids in every class, right? I mean, all right. Jimmy is a horrible human, right? I don't want to focus on that. But if you focus on kids who are good and they mean well, then you'll be happy, right? Like Hannah. All right. Let's say that Blake over here. Here's Blake. In his sad little face. All right. But Blake he's in the middle of running.
He
all
lost
right?
an arm.
All right. Blake wants a loan. And let's say here's Farmers Bank, right? And let's say Blake wants to build a factory, and let's say he wants $10 million from Farmers Bank, and he goes and he says, "I'm Blake. I want a loan." And they say, "How much for?" And you're like, 10 million, homie, on the right there. And so Farmers Bank might not have all that money. The Federal Reserve, every bank in the country can put some of their reserve money in the Fed. Remember we talked the other day about how banks were loaning each other money to make sure they stayed stable? Well, now there's a centralized bank that can do that, to stabilize the banking system. In fact, many people think that the Great Depression would not have had the problems it did had the Federal Reserve been more active. In fact, our current Federal Reserve chairman, a guy named Ben Bernanke, who's one of the most powerful people in the world, wrote his dissertation at Princeton on the fact that the Fed could have helped save us from the Great Depression by being more active. In fact, during this last recession, the Great Recession we've come out of, which was the worst economic downturn since the Great Depression, the Fed was extremely active, and many economists would say helped keep us from going into a much, much worse economic place. Anyway, so let's say Farmers Bank doesn't have $10 million to loan out. Does that mean they can't loan Blake money?
No.
No. What they do is they would borrow the $10 million from the Fed, and let's say at 2%, all right? And then the bank gives Blake a loan at 7%. How much is the bank making in real dollars?
5%.
5%, and the Fed's making money too, and you can use your $10 million to invest in a new factory and create jobs. Does this make sense? And so the Fed can send money. This 2% is called an overnight loan rate or a discount rate. And as this goes down, guess what happens to this interest rate? It goes down also, right? And there are different policies and graphs and all kinds of stuff I can show you next year that'll show you why this happens and exactly how mathematically it'll happen. It's not particularly, it is actually pretty, like if you're actually a monetary economist, it's very complicated. But what we're going to do in class is not complicated. But this is how the Fed's supposed to work. It's sweeping, huge legislation, radically changes the way our banking system works. And this happened in 1913 also. Underwood Tariff, 16th and 17th Amendment, Federal Reserve Act. And then he passes in 1914 the Federal Trade Commission, right? He puts into place the Federal Trade Commission, which is going to be a very active government agency that regulates all trade and commerce. In fact, if you go to Washington, D.C. today, the Federal Trade Commission is a gigantic building that regulates all kinds of commerce, all kinds of trade. It's kind of like an AP version of the Interstate Commerce Act. Because the Interstate Commerce Act is controlling just certain goods, specifically railroad rates, originally. This has power over many different parts of commerce, and a lot of it is about controlling corporations, and a lot of it is about consumer protection. And lastly, before I turn off this part of the camera, he in 1914 he passed the Clayton Antitrust Act. This essentially, why is it that we're scared of alligators? What's scary about alligators? Their teeth. Their teeth. The Sherman Antitrust Act of 1890 was sort of like an alligator with no teeth. It might gum you to death, but no one was really that scared of it. What the Clayton Antitrust Act did was place teeth into the Sherman Antitrust Act.
I just like that picture
Come here.
of an alligator with
Like an old alligator, right. When you're in Florida, like we're in Orlando last year, Harry Potter World, there literally are alligators like... I mean, like we went to a putt-putt place and they had a thing where we could feed little alligators with hot dogs. Like, this is craziness. It's stupid. Alright, the Clayton Antitrust Act also, if you'll remember, many businesses used the Sherman Antitrust Act as being anti-union, saying unions were getting in the way of free trade. And the Clayton Antitrust Act, that was no longer legal. So Clayton really forced companies into being scared of antitrust legislation and did not allow companies to use this as an anti-union tool. In fact, the president of the AFL, Samuel Gompers, said this was what he called the Magna Carta of union legislation. Which actually right now, if you're paying attention to anything in the country, in Michigan, they're stripping away rights of unions as we speak. It's very, very interesting, especially because Michigan probably has the most deep and rich union history in our country. And it's...
I didn't realize so many states were right-to-work states.
Yeah, over half of them are now.
Well, now half, exactly.
Yeah. It's, it really divides. It divided my house. Because my mom's family is Irish, Catholic, everyone's in a union. And my dad, when I grew up, was a personnel manager whose job was to keep unions out of companies. Like, we couldn't talk about it.
Well, I don't really understand how legally you're allowed to force anyone to do